I suppose it was a real blessing, for want of a better term, that COVID did hit, because that forced me, I didn't know what else to do. I'd no squash, all the clubs were closed, all the gyms were closed. So I started just writing like a maniac.
Hello and welcome to my podcast. I'm Tanya Corless. Let's talk about comedian. Funny woman, comedy club in Ireland. Do you know so many of them? I do. It's Orla Doherty.
Hi, Tanya. Gosh, you make me sound like I'm funny.
You are.
Well, I'm not really. I give it a go.
Anyway, I met you in real life only first time.
I know.
But I'm so delighted to have you over, and I hope we'll have a lovely chat.
I think we will. It's lovely to be here, and I really appreciate you asking me, and I'll cross my legs.
Do whatever suits you.
Yeah.
So, and make yourself comfortable. Are you comfortable?
I'm very
Can you
comfortable.
start?
Yes. Let's go.
Okay, so I have a few questions, but we'll start from the point one. In my opinion, it's very important to introduce you as a person.
Okay.
Not only who you are, like a comedian, a producer, a writer, a squash player.
Former.
Anyway, not...
Used to be, yeah, I know.
So, you are brought up in Dublin.
Yeah,
Malahide.
Portmarnock. Yeah.
So, and then you, somehow I knew you was living in Prague. Are you still there, or how does it work?
We've actually moved back to, in October, myself and Annabelle, who's my wife, moved back to Malahide. It's funny because, I don't know if you know, but when you're born in Portmarnock and you grow up in Portmarnock and then you say you've moved to Malahide, people are like, oh, the state of you moving to Malahide. It's sort of like we used to have this rivalry when we were kids.
Oh my God,
so it's very posh.
You think about the life in Ireland, in Prague. So what is it different for you personally?
I was living in Prague for 4 years. And I'm going to admit, I moved during COVID. So everything was kind of shut down, locked down. And what I struggled most with was the missing of Irish banter.
Oh.
So now I'm not saying Prague, I don't know if you've ever been, it is a beautiful, beautiful city, okay? Gorgeous architecture, history, everything about it is beautiful, except, and I hope I don't get in trouble for saying this, the people are not the most friendly people. Now this is my experience.
Okay, that's fine. We talk about our experience.
Yeah.
It's normal.
And I suppose growing up in Ireland, we're kind of spoiled with, you're walking down the road, you talk to somebody about the tree or the weather or the dog, you just chat. And I am used to that all my life. I'm 53. And so in Prague, I found it very difficult to engage with people. Well, first of all, the language barrier was a problem, which I don't have very good Czech at all. Yeah. But also, I can say, hello, how are you in Czech? And even if at that, and I'd be passing somebody in the street, they'd be kind of surprised, like, did somebody just speak to me? And my stepchildren would often be out walking with me and I'd say, hello, Dobry den, which is hello. And they'd be like, oh my God, Orla, you just don't do that here, So that was one of the biggest differences for me.
Oh, wow.
I really struggled with the culture. So what I did was, I've never played a game of Gaelic football or camogie in my life. I joined the GAA club because there was an Irish GAA club. And I thought, well, this is a good way. This is a good way to meet more Irish people.
Absolutely,
And it was perfect. So I joined, and actually I made Annabelle, my wife, join with me. And she's also athletic and sporty. And she ended up being a much better Gaelic football player than me. I just went for the pints and the banter and the chats, sitting in the pub after the games. That was my thing. So I was happy then. But Prague's beautiful.
I can imagine, my goodness, I love this. You're just going to change.
I'm just going to go on and on and on. Just tell me to shut up. What do you want me to do?
Let's back to 1992.
Oh.
So it's a story about America, as you won
a green card.
And also you came up as homosexual.
I did. I love how you said I came up.
I mean,
it popped up.
It's because it's strange at the time.
It was illegal.
Yes,
it was still illegal in Ireland.
Didn't talk about that, basically,
it was
openly.
very, very, especially because, as you know yourself, I grew up in a very strong Catholic household.
Most of us.
Yeah. And so it was extremely taboo. I have an older brother. I was the only daughter. So when I told my parents I was gay when I was 22 years old, and my mum laughed and said, oh, it's just a phase, because I used to go through lots of different phases back then. And my father was really quite devastated because I'm the only daughter.
Yeah.
We're not going to have any weddings. Well, that changed, as you'll find out. We're not going to have the white wedding. We're not going to have grandkids. And he was more, I suppose, concerned for my well-being. He was afraid I'd be bullied or I wouldn't get a good job in Ireland because it was illegal. Now, of course, a year later, it did get legalized a year later. But my dad was genuinely concerned. We had a great relationship and he was just worried for me, I suppose. So it was his idea. I was working in Break for the Border at the time, which was a great bar downtown. I think now it's a hotel, and the name of the hotel will come to me. It's Stephen's Green. And my dad said to me, why don't you apply to win a green card in the Irish lottery at the time? I think they still do it, actually. And so I applied in May. I got a letter in July, I think, saying I had been one of the lucky ones. And then off I went in August. So I was 22 years old, no experience, nothing. I had squash in my back pocket, which we'll talk about later, and landed in San Francisco, which I don't know if you know, but at the time was the biggest, gayest capital in the world. So I was completely wet behind the ears and naive and just thrown myself into the biggest gay play. It was like a sweet shop or a toy shop for a little child, to be among gay people who were comfortable in their own skin, walking down the street holding hands. You'd never do that in Ireland.
At the time, definitely not.
No, I mean, we used to sneak around the gay bars and hope nobody would see us. So that for me was just, oh my God, I'm in heaven, right?
When it's a young lady, even if you...
Thank you for calling me a lady.
But you are. You say to yourself, oh my God, I have differences compared to other ones. You admit it. Yeah. You spoke to your parents openly. Then you abroad with different people, different environment, different maybe culture even.
Yeah.
So how and what you did do to integrate yourself? How you just survive as a youngish?
Well, that's a good question. I didn't actually know anybody when I arrived in San Francisco, but there was a guy who also worked in Break for the Border who I knew had moved there, and I contacted him, and he was so nice. He was also gay, funny enough. We all left when we were gay.
San Francisco.
But I'm 22 years old, right? I'd come from a very, very strict upbringing. I land in San Francisco. I go to the bars. I meet people. I get involved. I do drugs.
Okay.
Right? Not big time, but I was
whatever.
Well, I was willing to give everything a go, because when you're young, you're just like, you think you're invincible, right?
Yeah, that's true.
So I went to a few parties, did some cocaine. I think it was cocaine. I don't know. I didn't buy any of it. I just did whatever was given to me, and met a woman. Moved then to my first job actually in San Francisco. I got a job in a cookie factory. Because I met a girl in a bar who was, this is what you do, right?
Yeah.
You do cocaine, you get a job as a cookie factory. And so I had the hairnet on, because, you didn't want the things getting in the food. And it was just a conveyor belt of dough that was my first job. And, for me, it was something completely new and different. I had come from being a professional squash player in the years prior to that, to giving up squash and now going crazy in San Francisco. So it was a complete turnaround. I mean, 108, whatever it is. I'm never good with these degrees, but the whole thing, the circle, turn around from what I used to do to this. And I met a woman who was living in the Silicon Valley, which was where Hewlett Packard and all the big companies, Apple, were just starting up at the time. And I moved into her house with her. She was an older woman, took me under her wing. And I do a bit of stand-up about this particular relationship, because she was much older, and I always say she was trying to teach me how to be the best lesbian in the whole world, which, of course, I strive to be. But we won't talk about that. And I didn't know what to do with myself, because all I knew how to do was play squash, coach, make cookies. And I had a job in Dublin also as a lounge pianist. I played the piano at the Country Club Hotel. Those are my only skills, right?
Talented.
Squash and piano. So she said, get a job as a security guard, because you don't need anything, you just really need a brain. So I'm not trying to belittle security guards.
Very unusual for a girl.
But yes. And you know what? It's funny you say that, because I did a writing course. I'm hopping all over the place now, but a few years back I did a writing course with a wonderful woman called Eileen Casey, and she wanted me to write a piece of memoir, which is what I've written. And I wrote this story about being a security guard and something that happened, which I'll share with you. And she wrote back to me, she said, Orla, maybe you misunderstood, but this is a memoir course, which means it's not fiction, it has to be real. And I said, no, I really was a security guard. I really was. This is a true story. So it's interesting you said that. I was roving around. I was doing the graveyard shift, because all the new people got stuck on graveyard, and I saw a little flame in one of the cafeterias in Hewlett Packard, and I blew it out, thinking I was going to save the whole building from going up into flames. But I radioed back, base, console base. I said, I've just blown out a flame. And the reply came back in the radio, Rover 1, I was Rover 1, you just blew out the pilot light. And the pilot light, as you know, which I didn't know, is what a cooker has to have on all the time. So he was afraid now if anybody lit a match, the whole place was going to go up because now I launched the gas. So that was my first job as a security guard.
You saved the place, okay? Good start.
The place, yeah, it didn't blow up. Then I met a woman. My life in my 20s, 30s was all about meeting a woman and moving. I met a woman then, broke up with the older lady and moved to Las Vegas.
Yes.
You probably read about this.
Yes, actually. Do you know what? You do very unusual things there.
I know. It wasn't stripping. I became a private investigator.
Correct.
I know.
That's what I read, and I was shocked. But to be honest, it's logically settled in my mind now, because you said she was working as a security guard.
Yeah.
And the investigator is relevant.
It is tied in. Yeah, because you're always kind of investigating and looking.
Okay, the puzzles put together.
Yes.
Okay, we have a picture now.
Also, though, because I loved Cagney and Lacey. I don't know if you remember that TV show in the 80s growing up. You're too young. Cagney and Lacey was a detective TV show that was on like every Thursday night. You know how we only got to watch it once a week? And I fell in love with Cagney, who was the blonde detective, and I thought I could be like her when I grew up. I know, right? She was blonde, clearly. So I did become a private investigator, but I was really, really bad at it, because any of the people that I would have to follow or watch or observe and write reports about, I felt sorry for them.
Okay.
And I remember one particular job, they put me sitting in a casino in Las Vegas and they gave me a whole bag full of quarters, and there are some poker machines that are built into the bar countertops, and my job was to watch the bartender to see if he was pocketing change or tips or whatever and stealing the money after he served drinks.
Wow. Okay.
So they gave me the quarters and I was pretending to play, although I really was playing poker and buying drinks and then watching him, and he was stealing the money. But I felt so bad. I thought, well, maybe he needs that. Like maybe he's got a sick child at home, or so I was a terrible private investigator. That's just one example. So I had to quit that job. It didn't work out.
Maybe it's good.
I know. Like you.
How long did you work?
It lasted about a year.
I was expecting months.
Oh, well.
Okay, so it's
very
not bad then. No, it's not bad. For a year, it's not bad.
Yeah, well, another job I followed a guy whose wife thought he was having an affair, and he was, but it was with a man. And I had to take pictures, and I just thought, I'm not cut out for this.
Oh my goodness. I love it. Do you know why? So this is a real story about real life that sometimes people don't considering existing. And it's fantastic because it's very unusual.
Yeah.
Because it's special.
Bit odd. I'm very special. You can say that again.
Okay, let's back to your squash loving. You are a squash lover, and you have 5 national squash titles.
Oh, you've done your research.
Yes, you do coaching as well. You're a private personal trainer, and you were doing some spin. Spin instruction. Yes, that's what you're doing. But at the age 48, you become the eldest female squash player on the Irish national squash team. Can you imagine, guys?
I know.
And you also, at the same year, you won the European Master Championship in Vienna.
You're good, Tanya.
Share this experience with us.
So I'll start at the beginning. When I was 9 years old and I started playing squash.
Yeah.
Mostly because my father used to play over in Sutton. And my mom at the time was quite ill. And so he had to mind us after school, and he would always bring us to watch him play squash. And I got bored just sitting up watching him play. So I decided I'll just go down and hit a ball myself. And back then, this is 1980, the squash rackets and tennis rackets, everything was made of wood, and they were very, very heavy. I'm this little scrawny little 9-year-old, and the racket was as heavy as myself almost. But somehow I liked it. I think I knew at a very early age that I was different, but I think playing squash was comforting for me because I was by myself. I was able to hit a ball. I was in control, and I didn't have to deal with other people, even though I'm very social now. I've sort of blossomed. I'm a late bloomer, shall we say. But I really enjoyed just hitting the squash ball. And so fast forward, I played, I won tournaments. I got on the Irish team when I was 16, went to New Zealand for the World Championships, went to Brighton for the World Championships 2 years later. I'm so grateful that I had squash in my life, because during all those years when the only thing really I felt I was good at was squash and English in school. But I could never tell anybody that I had these weird feelings that I was gay. Okay. So I'm 14, 15, 16 years old. Even younger than that, I knew that I had a crush on a nun, for example, or a PE teacher, you know, and I have a story that I'll share with you later that I talk about openly. I did at the Dublin Story Slam about the first time I felt there was something wrong with me, we'll say, or different. So squash to me was an escape. It saved me from a lot of things. As I said, the nice thing about squash as opposed to tennis is you can go into the court by yourself and you don't need an opponent to hit the ball back to you. You just hit it off the wall and it comes back. So I was very happy in my little sanctuary, shall we call it, right? Yeah. So when I left school, I was 18, I was playing in the Irish Championships here, and it's very funny how the universe works. My father was an air traffic controller, okay? And he knew another air traffic controller who was based in London who was a squash player. And that guy happened, just by luck, to be the manager of the world number 2 squash manager. So she came over to compete in the Irish Open, and he was with her as her manager. So he was obviously doing this part-time because his full-time job was air traffic control. And he saw my dad and he's like, what are you doing here? And my dad's like, well, my daughter plays squash. And he's like, oh, well, I'm the manager. And so this guy watched me play and said to my father, I want to take her to England to train her as a professional. She's good enough. You know, I was young, I was 17. And so had that sort of connection not occurred, I never would have got invited to go to England to become a professional. So it's like, I don't know. I believe in this stuff. I don't know if you do.
I do believe as well, yes. Should be happened.
Oh my God, absolutely. Right place, right time. Mm-hmm. My father, that man. So anyway, went to England for 3.5 years and I did train as a professional squash player. I got to be number 69 in the world, played in tournaments all around the world, you know, brilliant opportunity to travel. But I was still in the closet. I still hadn't told anybody I was gay. I'm sure they knew by the look of me. I had the short haircut and, you know, the mullet. I was petrified to tell anybody I was gay because I was I was definitely born. I was reared to believe that being gay was a sin and you were going to go to hell. God would punish you. I loved Holy Mary. I even went to Lourdes, which is a place in France where Holy Mary appeared as an apparition, supposedly.
Okay.
I applied to be a nun when I was 18. I don't know if you knew that.
No, I didn't know that. But
I wanted to be a nun.
Because the way you have
Holy
a
Mary.
feeling.
Yeah, and also
I thought that you're not a scene. Yeah, you didn't have a scene. Okay.
Yeah, and they rejected me. I had an interview with the nuns. They asked me all about my life, and then I got a letter in the post saying, "We loved talking to you, but we feel that God has bigger plans for you." Which, thank God, they were right.
So fair play to them. This is impressive.
It's unusual for them to turn people away, but they turned me away. So that's, you know, I love that story. So when I fell in love with a woman in England. And she broke my heart. And that is when I chose to come back to Ireland and face what I had to do, you know, because I was heartbroken. And I thought, I can't go through my life.
And you was this time what age? Still 20s?
I was 20.
Before America, basically. Yeah. Okay.
I was just coming on 21. And I moved home. I got a job in this bar, put my squash racket up, everything. My heart was broken. I didn't, you know, at the time, if you weren't top 10 or top 20 in the world at squash, you weren't making a living. Okay, it's different nowadays. And I just couldn't break into the top 50, you know, 60 was where I got. So I was just in a place where I was in a rut. I did call, we didn't have cell phones back then. So I looked in the yellow pages for LGBT, we didn't have QI even, we just had LGBT hotline in the yellow pages. And I rang this number and I said, I have to talk to somebody because I'm gay. So they invited me in. There was a community centre in town. I went in, met some wonderful people. I had a boyfriend in England, believe it or not.
You tried anyway.
Yeah.
You tried to understand. Okay.
And he had a feeling that I was, you know, falling for this girl because he knew this woman. I used to give her squash lessons. It was really difficult. And
he jealous probably.
Yeah, but it was hard for me to coach her because I fancied her. You know, when
you know, much closer, okay.
Yeah, and I had to show her the grip and the racket and everything. I had to touch her hand. It was terrible. So
it's a secret.
Yeah, not now. It's in my blog. Everybody knows about this. Her name was Stacey, if she's listening. She will listen, by the way. Steve, I rang Steve. I was in Dublin and I rang him and I told him I'd found this community. He said, I knew it already. He said, don't be afraid. You know, I kind of had a feeling. So I left home in Portmarnock where I was living to go and live with one of these gay guys that I'd met because I was afraid to tell my parents I was gay. So I just told them I was moving out. And I moved to a house in Kilbarrack where he had a horse in the garden. It was like a rough end of Kilbarrack. A lovely, wonderful guy called Junior Larkin. And my parents came and found me and they're like, what's going on? And that's when I had to tell them, look, okay. I'm gay. You know, at the time I wasn't playing squash anymore. I hadn't ever represented Ireland at a senior level. Now, senior level is anything over 18. So I'd played for Ireland as a junior, but I stopped playing because of my heart being broken. And so to come full circle to your point about me now being 48, 5 years ago, I had moved back to Ireland from America and I started playing squash again competitively, and I got selected for the first time ever in my life on the senior team. And I was the oldest Irish woman ever. And my teammates were 20, 21, 22, so I was like the mom of the team, but I was good enough skill-wise, and I was much fitter. My God, 10 kilos lighter. Yeah, and I was thrilled because at the same year, I was competing in the over 45s, which is called the Masters. So you've got junior, senior, and then Masters. Masters is over 35. So I won the European Championships over 45s the same year that I got to play for the senior team, which was one of the highlights of my career ever, of my life, I think. It was amazing.
Wow.
I know.
That is the story to be told.
I should start playing again because I've stopped playing.
But you have to maybe
I'm
just...
still playing a little bit.
Yeah.
But I still represent Ireland in the over 50s.
Okay. Do you do training for anybody?
I do.
Or just,
so I haven't coached. You know what happened during COVID? I was coaching. All my life in America, I was a squash coach and making a very good living. And I also worked with underprivileged children for a long time, in Boston.
Yes.
Did you read about that?
Yes, I did, yeah.
And that was, I have to say, probably the most rewarding job I've ever had, because I was using my sport to help underprivileged, disadvantaged families and children to learn a sport, to get their homework done, to go out in the community and soup kitchens and cleaning up the beaches and all sorts of stuff. And so it wasn't just squash; it was a whole sort of compass. And that was a very fulfilling job for me. But then, on the other extreme, I worked in private clubs where, Mr. Millionaire here would come in and pay 200 quid for a half-hour lesson, Okay. So one extreme to the other.
And which one is better?
I have to say I
mentally.
Oh, mentally, for sure, working with the urban programs.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, I had a fancy life. I lived in Santa Barbara for 10 years. And what a beautiful place. And by the way, I hope everybody's safe over there with these fires. It's terrible.
At the moment,
yeah. So, yeah, I've kind of had multiple extremes.
But if you talk about the squash, right? Would you, for example, you stop coaching, whatever the reason, maybe you'll get back again, hopefully. Yeah. But you can do still training for yourself and maybe bring your friend to do training together, just to be fit, whatever, be on kind of a top.
I know, and I'm really glad you're encouraging me to do this, because it's been on my mind. I became a spin instructor just before COVID, and I was super fit, and I worked in the leisure centre in Portmarnock, and I did the 6 a.m. classes, and I absolutely loved it. I loved spinning, and I have a spin bike at home in Malahide, which I've used once. But then COVID hit, and I know it shouldn't be an excuse, but I'll tell you what the beautiful thing about COVID. Yes, I stopped training, I stopped squash, I stopped spinning, but I became a writer.
We'll back now to there.
Do you want to go there?
Yes, okay. Go. To be honest, you wrote the children book, the first one.
Oh my God.
So tell
how did you find that?
So
I don't even think my writing friends know this about me. I did. I wrote a children's book. I had a dog, a Cairn Terrier, like Toto from The Wizard of Oz. Okay. And I had her from when, oh my God, I need to tell you about the bipolar thing.
We'll back to this one.
We have to, because it's part of the story about the dog.
Okay, then we start.
I'm sorry.
It's okay. So no, but yeah. So in some stage of your life, you are eventually you had two marriages, and today is a third marriage for you.
Yes.
So and you have kids as a stepkids.
Stepkids, yeah.
So and at age 30, approximately, after when you moved to America.
Yeah.
You basically you moved to America just because you won the American green card, or because you tried to escape from something?
Well, it was both. I wanted to escape and I won the green card, so it was the perfect opportunity.
Just time.
Yeah, I never imagined going to America for any reason other than to get away from Ireland, because it was so repressive.
Yeah.
But look at us now. We've come so far.
So the parents basically supported you to go there because of things going around at the time. Definitely. Okay, and at that age 30, you've been diagnosed with the bipolar disorder.
Yes.
So how your life has been changed?
Well, my girlfriend at the time, who was lovely, and we're still in touch, had difficulty dealing with me when I was diagnosed with bipolar disorder. I went off the rails, I suppose. I was always a bit of a class clown. I always suffered from depression. my moods were all over the place. You know, I'd be super excited and high and manic, or I'd spend days in bed. So bipolar disorder was diagnosed the Christmas of 1999. So yeah, I was coming up and being 29. Was I 30? Doesn't matter. I was in hospital for 2 weeks. And the thing is, when I was diagnosed, I almost felt a sense of relief. Like somebody is finally telling me, yeah, there's something up there, but it's okay. See? Okay. And at the time, even back then now, it's what am I? Yeah, it's 20 years ago. Mental illness in Ireland was still quite taboo. Like nobody would talk about it.
That's true.
When I told
even
my parents,
nowadays, people.
Yeah, but it's much better nowadays, I feel. But my brother, for example, never heard of the term bipolar. He thought it was something to do with polar bears in Iceland, and I was going on a trip, you know. Okay. And my cousin thought I had a brain tumor when my parents said, no, Orla has bipolar. Like nobody really knew what it was. And bipolar disorder is just the modern day term for manic depression. And people used to think that manic depression meant severe depression, but actually the manic is the mania part of bipolar. So you have this mania.
Yes, they have the difference.
Yeah, and there's bipolar 1 and bipolar 2. So I felt happy to be diagnosed. I had lots of fun on the inside, I say, with, you know, I had a roommate who thought I was trying to kill her because she would very stinky farts in the middle of the night, and so I'd spray my perfume and she was convinced I was trying to suffocate her. You know, that's just one story. So I have lots of good stories. I also started a table tennis league inside, and the doctors used to say to me, for somebody who's so depressed, you're actually very happy. When I was in the wards, I sort of, maybe I felt safe. I don't know.
Yeah, when
I
you
think I felt
people.
safe.
So when you're feeling like you kind of in depression, in this kind of a bad mood, when you stand by yourself, or when you?
No, I had a girlfriend, but I was very up and down. Like I'd be the one who you go into a bar and I'd be up on the table dancing. Mm-hmm. Dancing Queen is my theme song, and I just loved it. And I wonder why I was always this performer. Okay. Which I didn't realize. Fast forward now, we'll talk about the acting thing in a minute. But I'd get pulled down from security guards. They'd pull me out and throw me out in the snow, and I'd take off all my clothes and make a snow angel in the snow naked, right? So I used to do stuff like that. So I was mad, pure mad.
But you have good memories.
Yeah.
And experience to share.
But then I'd get so, I know I'm alive, right?
Yeah, that's most important.
I know, high five. So, but then I'd get into such deep depression. I tried to kill myself twice. I don't know if it was to do with being gay or just this horrible darkness, you know, of not being accepted. So, long story short, I had over 10 years, I had 5 different visits to psychiatric wards where I would go in for a couple of weeks at a time. Never had extended stays where some people go in for months and months and months.
Yes.
I think I just always got to that point where, okay, it's time. I need to go in and get a reset, get a recharge, and fix myself. And I do blame alcohol. I blame or over use of alcohol. I mean, who doesn't love a glass Prosecco once in a while, right? Or a bottle. Overuse of alcohol. I also was prone to taking Percocet, which is a prescription painkiller, because I had back surgery and I had a little stash of these Percocets. And when you mix a bottle of Heineken with one of these Percocets, oh my God, it's just a wonderful feeling.
Okay.
Now, I was only 30, okay?
It's a secret.
Right, this is a secret. I'm telling you so much. I'm actually telling you more than I've told anybody. You've got this way about you, you see. It's cathartic.
Thanks very much.
No,
it's a
compliment. So, over 10 years, I was on prescription medication. Lithium, which is...
I know. I was working in the hospital.
Oh, okay. So you know, right? You would have loved to have me as a patient.
We'll have a fun for definite.
I was on Risperdal, which was for antipsychotic. And I did go through a phase where I was quite paranoid. I would think people were talking about me all the time. And that's why they put me on this Risperdal. I was on Ativan for, I was on 4 or 5 different things. Anyway, when I moved to Santa Barbara, my father died in 2008. And that really was the icing on the cake. We had a great relationship. I was very close to him. And I tried to kill myself again in Philadelphia. I was living there. And I had a great friend who I'd known for years and years and years, who invited me to come to Santa Barbara. She said, get some sunshine, this is what you need. And I went into a psychiatric ward in Philadelphia, came out and moved to California within months to be with her. She was my second wife, a beautiful person, beautiful friend, lives in Ireland. We're still good friends. she wasn't my second wife before I moved. I moved
around here to find a place.
Yeah. So I had a wonderful doctor in Santa Barbara, and his name was Dr. Polo. And what I found with Dr. Polo is he was very open to me exploring whether or not to come off medication, because I found that the medication I was taking made me very dull. Like I write in my memoir, which should be out at the end of the year, one of the first chapters talks about how I knew in California the birds were singing, but I couldn't hear them. Or I knew the coffee was brewing in the kitchen, but I couldn't smell it. Or, I felt like everything was numbed and dampened down. And I just felt like I wasn't myself. And then I bumped into a friend of mine on the squash circuit, because I went back to playing squash in America, which is where I got the titles. And she said, "Oh, you've lost your spark. There's something kind of missing." And so I got to have this conversation with this doctor, and he said, for somebody with bipolar disorder, you're definitely on the better end of potentially managing yourself without medication, but you need a really good support system. You need a good community. You need to stay off the booze and the Percocet, all these things that I would have to manage. And I think because I was then 45, I was in a position I was more mature. I was a little bit more wise, maybe.
Of course.
I knew myself better, and I did have a wonderful community of friends around me. And so I chose to slowly you can't, as you know yourself, if you worked in hospital, you can't just stop. So I think it took 9 months for me to come off all medication completely.
Yeah.
At the same time that happened, I'd made the decision with my second wife to move back to Ireland. This was 2015. No, it was the right thing. People in my family were dying that I was close to, and I had this pulling to just be near my family.
To get back, yeah.
So we moved back with 2 dogs. One was little Odie, who I wrote the book about. And so by now she was 18. So I wrote the book when she was only 2.
Wow.
It was called That's Odie. And another dog called Shandy, who was a rescue, who was a beautiful, timid pit bull mix. And I had stopped taking medication. And that's when I decided to keep coaching in Ireland. I was coaching in Portmarnock, a little bit in Sutton, got my spin instructor certification, and then COVID hit. And everything shifted for me.
And changed again.
Yeah.
It was tough for you as a person who was suffering from this disorder.
Yeah.
And stopped taking medication, moved back to a different country again. Even it's your home, but it's still different because...
new Ireland.
Yes.
Completely different.
And how did you sort yourself out? Because I believe it's emotionally, mentally, it will be harsh to accept all their, millstones around you.
It was tough initially because part of me was thrilled that I had my kind of little mania back, a little...
Yeah.
I love that feeling of just, I don't know, I get a little high sometimes naturally, right? Not from drugs. But I was very well aware that if that high feeling became low, I would have to really address it straight away. Whereas in the past, I would just allow myself to go deeper and deeper and deeper. So I think it was a combination of having a support system, wonderful community, and being, at the time, I was quite fit, and exercise is so important, for mental health.
That's one thing that people have to do.
Yeah,
especially with those type of disorders.
Yeah,
everybody, but
it's so important.
A discipline as well.
And it's nice to talk to you about this, because I, up until recently, really was still quite ashamed of saying that I had bipolar disorder. Up until about 3 or 4 years ago when I started writing my blog. And it's when I started writing that everything started coming out. And I realized, oh my God, I've had all this inside me. And when I write, as you probably have seen, I write with humor. So I joke about being in the psychiatric wards. And a lot of people have written to me and they can relate to that. And they're like, you just make it seem so manageable,
Yes.
And so I don't write, oh, poor me.
I like this actually.
Do you?
Yes.
Yeah.
I love when people face it what they're struggling with, but they don't looking for sympathy from other ones. No, I don't want
sympathy at all.
They need sympathy, but on a different level.
Yeah, like empathy.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Which I'm getting now I even have a better relationship with my mother.
When you open up and explain what's your bother. Yeah.
And I find, since turning 50, I'm 53 now, I'll be 54 this year, I have found my true self. Like, it's so much easier to be authentic than try to fake, say stuff because you think somebody wants to hear it, or...
Oh, no, you can't last long if you're doing that.
But I did for a long time.
You'll collapse eventually,
yes. Yeah. So So I suppose it was a real blessing, for want of a better term, that COVID did hit, because that forced me, I didn't know what else to do. I'd no squash. All the clubs were closed. All the gyms were closed. So I started just writing like a maniac, and I was getting the money from the government. Every week they would give people who couldn't work 200 and something a week, which thank God for that. But I had met Annabelle, who I'm married to now, in 2019 in November. But we were separated because of COVID. She was living in Prague. She's from Malta.
Okay.
And had moved to Prague in 1993 with her then husband, because he was exploring his career. Anyway, my writing developed because I joined this writing group called writing.ie, Writers Inc. online, which is led by Maria McHale, who you know well, and Vanessa Fox O'Loughlin, who's a prolific crime writer in Ireland. She's known as Sam Blake is her author name.
Yeah.
She's got 11 bestsellers now. And I joined this group. I met Val Troy. Yeah. I met loads of wonderful people. And what we would do is every week, and we still do now, we share our work, and Sam would critique and Maria would critique and everybody else in the group would critique. And that's how I met Val Troy, who was also a comedy writer. I was writing comedy, so I would do a little bit of fiction, but quite a lot of memoir. And Val and I met for a pint, there we go with the pints, in Rathgar, and we just hit it off. And I had done stand-up comedy, before COVID had hit. Somebody said to me, Orla, you're really funny, why don't you try stand-up? And I don't do jokes, I don't tell jokes, I just tell stories like I'm talking to you, and some people find them funny and some people don't. But I suppose it's my delivery.
Do you know why? Because the expression you're using when you try to explain and deliver the message, I love that.
Yeah. So I did stand-up comedy, and when I met Val, after a while, she said, I'd love to try that. I could never have the nerve. And I said, of course you could. You're just standing up, tell a story. You don't have to tell a joke, just tell a story of something funny that happened to you. We've all had something embarrassing or funny. So she tried it, and she loved it. She was a hit. And then she and I connected because the Funny Women UK group were looking to put on a show in Ireland, but they had nobody to produce it. Mm-hmm. And I said, sure, look, we'll give it a go. So we did.
Well done.
And we've done 3 shows, sold out Whelan's main stage, 250 people every night. And we've had people in there like Deirdre O'Kane, Justine Stafford, all the big names, Sophia Cadigan, have performed. And we also got Barbara Scully, who I don't know if you know Barbara Scully. She's a presenter.
I mean, not personally, but of course I read about her.
She did her first ever stand-up gig in Whelan's for us at age 62. I mean, imagine.
Fair play to her.
And now she's doing her own show, one-woman show. She's touring.
That is example. By the way, everybody, listen to that.
Isn't it?
Amazing. Doesn't matter how old are you. Matter how you feel about yourself, what you're doing. If you're happy, if you satisfy yourself, if it's match your dreams, or you help yourself to bring this dream come true, God, don't think about other ones. What they're saying to you.
Who gives a bleep what people think, right? And that's the thing about getting older. I don't know how old you are, 40, 38?
40 something. I forgot.
I have kind of lost the worry that, what are people going to think? I just don't give a bleep anymore. I don't. And
I stopped the same.
Did you?
Yeah.
Well, you're good, because I wish I was the age you were. It took me a long time.
I get enough one stage. I said, it's enough. It's older than love to anybody.
I know.
Anyhow, under any circumstance, I had enough.
Good for you.
And